Lucy found the camera at a yard sale on a cloudy Saturday morning. She hadn't planned on going. She'd stepped out to buy groceries and spotted the small sign tacked to a tree. The yard, strewn with old board games and chipped picture frames, resembled every yard sale she'd ever seen, except for a tiny table near the garage. There, a box sat apart, items inside barely visible. Something compelled her to rummage through its contents. Inside were old postcards, a rusted key, a tangle of costume jewelry, and an instant camera that looked to be from several decades ago. Its corners were scuffed, and traces of peeling stickers suggested it had once belonged to a child. She tested the shutter button, half expecting the device to be broken. But it emitted a low mechanical whir, which made her heart skip a beat. It worked. She bought it on the spot without bargaining, heading home with a mixture of curiosity and excitement coursing through her veins. Once back in her apartment, Lucy placed the camera carefully on her wooden desk. She took out the pack of film she had also purchased. Surprisingly, it was still sealed, and loaded it inside the camera, pushing until she felt the mechanism latch in place. It had been a while since she'd used anything so analog. The familiar chunk of the camera's gears felt comforting, a small piece of nostalgia amid an otherwise chaotic morning. She pointed it into the hallway and pressed the button. The camera spat out a blank piece of film with a loud click and whir. Holding the developing photograph, Lucy waited for the image to appear. Slowly, shadows and colors bled into view. The hallway emerged, her worn hardwood floor captured in that signature Polaroid haze. Yet something else began to form, a faint shape near the far wall. She leaned closer. A small child stood there, eyes wide and mouth parted, as if in mid-cry. Lucy blinked, startled. For a moment, she thought she was imagining it, but there was no denying it was the figure of a young boy, no older than 7 or 8, in the photograph. The hallway, as she peered down it in real life, was certainly empty. Lucy's heart thudded. She placed the photo on her desk and hurried into the hallway. She flicked on every light, scanning each corner. There was nothing there, only the drifting motes of dust in a quiet, vacant corridor. For a while she just stood there, perplexed and uneasy. If it was a reflection or trick of the light, it was an oddly precise one. Disturbed, Lucy contemplated whether the film might be old or defective, though such a defect seemed bizarrely specific. She pushed her misgivings aside until the next morning, when she got the impulse to take another photo. This time she aimed the camera at her living room. Again the camera thrilled to life. Again a photograph slid out, developing in her trembling hand. At first it was just the couch and coffee table, a normal snapshot. But then the outline of the same child emerged. Fainter perhaps, tucked in the far corner behind her sofa. Lucy felt cold. He wore the same wide-eyed expression of terror, and strangely, his posture had changed. He was seated against the wall, knees drawn up as though hiding. Making a point to remain calm, Lucy scoured the internet for any known camera glitches that might produce ghostly images. She found references to double exposures and strange chemical anomalies, but nothing that would repeatedly conjure up the same child in different positions, especially behind furniture that changed with each shot. She set the camera down, resolved not to use up more film until she understood what was really happening. Yet all day she felt a tug, a curious dread that compelled her to pick it back up. By evening, the urge grew too strong. She brought the camera to her friend's house, hoping to confirm or refute her mounting suspicions. Margie lived in a modest bungalow a few blocks away. Lucy showed her the photos. Margie was equal parts intrigued and unsettled, but she suggested they try one picture in her living room under well-lit conditions. The camera clacked and whirred. They watched as the image developed against the warm lamplight. Margie's floral wallpaper came into focus first, then the outline of her television and a final swirl revealing Margie's coffee table. Despite Lucy's dread, there was no child this time, just a normal shot. Lucy's breath eased, shoulders dropping in relief. "Maybe it's fixed," she murmured, setting the photo aside on Margie's end table. But when Margie wandered to the kitchen to grab them both cups of tea, Lucy took one more picture. Drawn by an inexplicable compulsion, the camera spat out another Polaroid, and as it sharpened into view, Lucy's relief vanished. The child's shape was there again, in the shadow by Margie's bookshelf. His hands clutched at the edges of the frame, as though trying to scramble out. It was too real, too unsettling. Immediately, Lucy flipped the photo face down on the table, mind racing. Why had he not appeared in the first photo at Margie's place, but then reappeared in the second? When Margie returned, Lucy couldn't bring herself to show her friend the new image. She felt a strange protectiveness, as though the horror captured in that fleeting instant was hers alone to bear. Instead, Lucy crammed the newly developed photo into her purse, holding it so Margie wouldn't see. There was fear that if Margie knew, she'd make Lucy leave it in her house or do something drastic like destroy the camera, but Lucy wasn't ready to destroy it. Not yet. She felt compelled to figure out who this child was and why he appeared. That night brought unrest and half-remembered dreams. Lucy felt a presence near her bed, as though small feet were scuttling around. Yet when she startled awake, there was only darkness. Morning light creeping through her curtains did little to quell her nerves. She decided to contact an old acquaintance who worked in photography restoration. He might help her see if the images had some hidden telltale sign. That, or he might call her a fool. But Lucy couldn't relax without answers. She visited the man, a quiet, bespectacled photographer named David. He specialized in reconstructing old photographs, sometimes even those from salvage jobs where pictures were damaged by floods or sunlight. Lucy handed him the Polaroids, heart pounding as he examined them. He peered critically first at the childless photograph from Margie's living room, and then the ones that showed the boy. David's expression grew grim. "This is no double exposure," he said softly. "It isn't just a chemical fluke either. There's depth to the figure. And from what I can see, it's the same boy in each shot." Lucy nodded, swallowing hard. "But here's something else." He pointed to the boy's first appearance in Lucy's hallway photograph. "Look at his eyes. You can almost discern a reflection like light bouncing off something or someone standing just behind the lens. It's as if he's looking at you." An invisible weight pressed on Lucy's chest. Every new revelation carried the suffocating sense that she was peering deeper into something she couldn't simply walk away from. David offered to scan the images and try some digital enhancements. She agreed, hoping the process might uncover a clue. While David worked on them, Lucy spent hours in the local library, combing through old newspaper archives, searching for stories of missing children or any tragic events that might correlate. She found plenty of heartbreaking tales over the decades. A lost girl here, a boy taken there, but none who matched the face she saw. Even the oldest articles from the 1970s didn't show a photograph that resembled the boy. Frustration mounted, feeding her growing anxiety. That night, Lucy dared to snap just one more picture. She told herself it was necessary. If she didn't keep searching for answers, how would the mystery ever be resolved? With trembling hands, she aimed the camera out her apartment window, capturing a portion of the dark street below and the faint glow of a corner street lamp. As the photograph developed, the boy materialized behind the telephone pole, half hidden. His hands were pressed together, almost in prayer. He wore a thin t-shirt despite the cold, and the expression on his face was of raw, unfiltered terror. Lucy's throat closed. She quickly shut her curtains and placed the camera in her closet, as if secluding it might lock the child away. When Lucy's phone rang the next afternoon, it was David. He spoke in a hushed tone, explaining that his digital enhancements had turned up something unusual. In each photograph, the boy had faint markings on his wrists. Bruises? Rope burns? David couldn't say for certain, but they suggested he was restrained or ill-treated in some way. Lucy's mind spiraled with horrifying possibilities. Kidnapping, abuse, a desperate child in danger somewhere. But the strangest part was that David had pinpointed an unusual symbol scrawled in the background of two images. It resembled a partial triangle with a cross through it, so faint it almost vanished into the Polaroid's grain. In response, Lucy spent another restless day scouring online forums about occult symbols. Nothing immediate popped up which gave a definitive meaning. Everything felt nebulous, as though she were grappling with illusions. Yet that symbol had to be a clue. Anxiety clutched her so strongly that she found herself braving the camera once more. She took a photograph of her own bedroom this time, deeply unsettled by her own fixation, but unable to resist the urge to see more pieces of the puzzle. Her heart hammered as the image formed. There he was, crouched at the foot of her bed. Up close, Lucy could see the tear tracks on his cheeks, the bruises on his arms. She felt heartbreak and horror simultaneously. She stared in silent turmoil until something in the background of the photo caught her attention. A fragment of the odd symbol chalked onto her own wall, so faint that, had it been real, she would have noticed. Accusing the photograph of lying did her no good. It was there in the picture, overshadowed by the presence of the boy. That same evening, Lucy paced her apartment, weighed down by confusion. Through the windows, night pressed its face against the glass. She jumped at the slightest creak in the floorboards. She thought she heard whispers from the closet where the camera was stored. Finally, steeling herself, she wrenched the closet door open. The camera sat there, dull and inert. Holding it was both terrifying and compelling, like gripping a loaded gun whose power she didn't fully understand. She decided to share all of this with Margie, who had always provided her with support and good sense. Together they pored over the Polaroids, eyes riveted on the child's fearful presence. Lucy confessed that she couldn't shake the feeling the child was reaching out through the photos, pleading for rescue from some place that existed just out of sight. Instead of mocking her, Margie stayed silent for a long while, processing. Then she nodded with solemn resolve. "We should see if he responds," Margie said. "I know it sounds wild, but what if we speak to him? If these images are supernatural or psychologically driven, maybe there's a way to interact through the camera, or something else." Lucy nearly laughed at the notion, but something about it stirred hope within her. They tried, rather awkwardly, to call out to the boy in Lucy's apartment. They used her phone's flashlight to snap pictures in the dark, each time softly asking, "Where are you? What do you need?" A flick of the camera's shutter, the mechanical whir, then waiting in tense silence for the photo to develop. Over and over they got fleeting glimpses, the boy's red-rimmed eyes, his mouth silently shaping a word. In one photograph, Lucy thought his lips formed an H or haw shape. Another photo, Lucy and Margie glimpsed him with both hands extended, as though pushing her or beckoning her away. On the 7th try, Lucy's voice trembled. "Tell us how to help you," she whispered. The camera spat out the film. When the picture developed, the child was turned away, torso twisted, a hand pointing into the void. Behind him, Margie spotted the faint lines of what seemed to be a wooden door, partially open. Near its frame was that symbol again, drawn in chalk or paint. They dissected every centimeter of the Polaroid, convinced this scene might be a real place or a metaphor. Could this door be somewhere in Lucy's building? Some hidden basement or locked storage room? The camera's clues gave them a purpose. Determined and anxious, Lucy and Margie spent the next day combing the hallways, basement, and roof access points of the building. They tapped on walls, looking for hollow spaces, sometimes pressing their ears close in a vain hope of hearing a child's cry. Nothing gave them the sort of door or symbol they'd seen. The caretaker of the building insisted there was no hidden space. Lucy felt frustration welling up, but she realized that the boy's captivity, if real, might not be in her building at all. The camera might simply project the child into whatever environment Lucy was photographing, bridging two realities. They began traveling around town, snapping photos in deserted areas, alleyways, abandoned lots, old shut-down shops. In each new photograph, the boy persisted, still frozen in terror, but no door appeared. Now he was always standing or crouched in the background as though searching. It was painful to behold. Lucy felt helpless, haunted by a child she didn't know how to reach. She and Margie nearly gave up, especially after Margie admitted the recurring nightmares she'd been having about a lost boy banging on walls. It was during one of these nighttime explorations in a dank alley behind a boarded-up bakery that Lucy's phone buzzed. David had discovered something important while analyzing the symbol. It partly matched, an archaic marking used in certain reclusive cult practices from half a century ago. A specific mention of a group had come up. They were rumored to hold clandestine gatherings in old buildings around the city outskirts. Lucy and Margie latched onto this lead, desperate as it sounded. Early the next morning, they drove out to a dusty edge of the city where an abandoned asylum complex stood behind chain-link fencing. They parked on the side of the road, hearts pounding at the sight of the looming structure. Rusted gates and graffiti-laced walls made it look like a place nightmares were born. The asylum had been shut down decades ago due to malpractice allegations and negligence. Locals claimed it was haunted, or that unknown individuals still roamed the corridors at night. Lucy clutched the camera. They approached the fence, searching for a gap to slip through, eventually finding a loose panel they twisted aside. Once inside, they walked past a courtyard of broken concrete and rotting weeds to find the main entrance. A large wooden door, one that gave Lucy an eerie tingle, reminiscent in shape to the one glimpsed behind the boy. Cautiously, they tried the handle. It gave way with a rusty groan. In the dim interior, rising dust clogged their throats and the floors squeaked alarmingly. Hallways branched off in multiple directions, each lined with half-smashed windows. Lucy took the camera out and snapped a photo of the corridor. When it developed, the boy was there, standing further down the hallway, arms hugging himself. A swirl of adrenaline propelled Lucy forward. They repeated the process at intervals, following wherever the silhouette of the child beckoned in the Polaroids. Eventually, they reached a locked metal door near what once might have been the administrative offices. The camera's latest photo showed the child on the other side, pressing his hands against the rusting metal, face full of dread. Margie seized a flashlight and scouted for a key or another entrance. Lucy tested the door and found it resistant. Anxiety built with each passing minute. They tried another corridor that looped around, eventually discovering a battered staircase leading downward. The steps groaned underfoot, leading them to a lower level that smelled of damp rot. The camera's flash revealed graffiti, broken furniture, and shattered glass. At the far end of the corridor stood another door, wooden, battered, partially open. Lucy's heart nearly stopped. The symbol etched into its warped surface was the same partial triangle with a cross. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the camera. They approached with shallow breaths. The air felt suffocating, as if the building itself resented their trespass. Pushing the door wider, they found a large chamber with withered chairs lining the walls. Strange white symbols scrawled across the floor. A hush lingered, unbroken by any living sound. Margie caught Lucy's eye and nodded, bracing herself. They stepped inside. Lucy snapped a photograph of the chamber's interior, hands unsteady. When the image developed, it showed the room, the chairs, the floor, but the child stood in the center, arms outstretched. Rope or tape around his wrists gave Lucy a stab of pity and horror. She looked up from the Polaroid, scanning the empty chamber. Even if the child was truly stuck somewhere else, another time, or in some spiritual realm, maybe there was a clue here that could free him. A faint scuffing noise emerged from behind a tall metal cabinet. Margie and Lucy froze. Slowly they inched around it, hearts pounding so loudly Lucy could barely hear her own breathing. The cabinet concealed a small door at floor level, a kind of crawl space. If Lucy hadn't been looking carefully, she might have missed it entirely. She swallowed, mustered courage, and tugged on the latch. It took a few tries, but finally the hatch creaked open, releasing a noxious odor of stale air. Dust swirled in the flashlight's beam. The space beyond was cramped, lined with old newspapers and debris. Lucy's camera strap slid from her shoulder as she dropped to her knees to peer inside. Margie stumbled back, covering her mouth. A wave of dread crashed over Lucy, as if stepping into this lair might unravel her sanity. Yet she forced herself to crawl through, ignoring the tightness in her chest. The passage opened into a recessed utility tunnel, pungent with mold. Lucy coughed as she aimed her flashlight along the grimy walls. It felt endless. Fear slithered through her veins, urging her to turn back. But then she glimpsed something up ahead, a small pile of tattered blankets. Drawing closer, Lucy saw that the blankets rested on an old mattress, sagging in the middle. Chills skittered up her spine. Strewn across the bedding were childlike drawings, done in crayons that had all but faded. Stick figures, a rough depiction of a house, and the repeated scribble of that same symbol. Suddenly her flashlight landed on a chain anchored to the floor. At its end was a small cuff, the size that might fit a child's wrist. Lucy felt sick, a fierce wave of sorrow and revulsion flooding her. She lifted the camera and snapped a picture without thinking, capturing that monstrous evidence. When she looked at the Polaroid as it developed, she expected to see the boy. Instead, she saw an empty mattress with the chain and cuff. Confused, she scanned the immediate area. No sign of him. But the photo told a different story. The chain was broken in the image, which wasn't the case in front of her. In real life, the metal was intact, rusted but whole. Yet in the Polaroid, it had clearly been snapped open. Movement behind her made Lucy jump. Margie had followed, her face pale as she took in the grim scene. "Did you find?" she began, but her words failed her. Instead, she crouched next to Lucy, eyes darting from the chain to the drawings. "Somebody was kept here," she whispered, voice trembling with anger and sadness. "But it was so long ago." Tears threatened Lucy's composure. She realized that if the child was truly a ghost from the past, if he died here, perhaps his spirit was reaching out for release. Or if he was still alive somehow, staggering though that idea was, he might be in dire need. She moved to the mattress, checking behind it. At first, she found only more scraps of old newspapers, then a small tin box, its lid covered in dust. Lucy pried it open, shining her flashlight inside. Nestled in the box was the same symbol etched into a slice of wood. Beside it lay black and white photos of a boy with vacant eyes. Lucy's heart lurched. Was it the same child? The boy in these decades-old pictures seemed to have the same shape of face, the same white eyes, though younger. On the back of one photograph, a single name was scrawled in pencil. Jacob. Lucy traced the writing carefully. She became aware of Margie's ragged breathing. "We should get out of here," Margie whispered. "Call the police, bring them back, let them see this evidence of whatever happened." Lucy stuffed the tin box in her bag, trembling. She wanted to help the child, but she no longer knew how. Still on her knees, Lucy lifted the camera one final time and snapped a shot of the cramped tunnel. She breathed a silent prayer. "Jacob," she whispered. "We know your name now. We want to help." Tears glistened in her eyes. "Show us what to do." The Polaroid slid out in that same mechanical whir. As the image emerged, Lucy could scarcely believe what she saw. The boy was no longer cowering or screaming. He stood near the chain, looking directly at the camera, and in the image, Lucy saw him place his small hand on his chest, over his heart, then gesture outward, as if releasing something. The chain behind him was broken, cast aside. An indescribable surge of relief and sorrow pulsed through Lucy. Tears slipped freely down her cheeks. It felt like a farewell, and in the photograph, Jacob was faint, almost transparent, fading into the gloom. It was as though the haunting had finally lifted. Shortly after, they made a hasty exit from the asylum, clutching the camera and the tin box. Lucy's mind reeled with questions. Had they truly freed Jacob's spirit by bearing witness to his suffering and discovering his name? The emptiness in her chest felt both raw and strangely lighter, a sense that a child's final cry for help found an audience at last. They contacted the authorities, turning over the tin box and their story. Local law enforcement promised to investigate, though Lucy suspected that after decades the truth behind Jacob's captivity might be murky, lost to time and neglect. Still, it felt right to do something. Days passed in a blur of anxious phone calls and restless nights. Yet the camera stayed silent, as if its purpose had been fulfilled. During one sleepless night, Lucy found the courage to gently test the camera's powers again. She snapped a photo of her living room. The picture developed with no sign of the child, just an empty couch, a blank wall, a normal snapshot of an unremarkable scene. Tears welled in her eyes. She both missed that sad, frightened child and felt relief that he was no longer trapped in her photographs, perhaps no longer trapped anywhere. In time, the police informed her they had traced records indicating an 8-year-old boy disappeared from a nearby orphanage decades ago. There were rumors the child had been taken by a caregiver with ill intentions. The orphanage staff had since died off, and no formal resolution was ever recorded. The trail ended with unconfirmed sightings. Lucy couldn't be sure if that was Jacob, but her gut told her it must be. Over the following week, Lucy found occasional glimpses of peace. She stored the camera away in her closet, uncertain whether to keep it or destroy it, but she couldn't bring herself to throw it out. It represented a horrifying but profound experience, one that might have freed a lost soul. Every now and then, Lucy thought she felt a presence in her apartment. Not frightening, though. A warm hush, like a gentle wave of gratitude passing through. She never took another picture with that camera. Instead, she left it there in its battered shape, letting dust settle over it. Perhaps one day, if something else reached through the veil wanting to be found, the camera might stir again. But in the quiet weeks that followed, Lucy's nights became restful, her dreams no longer plagued by the echo of a crying child. When she closed her eyes, she almost sensed Jacob free in some soft, sunlit place, and that she felt was enough.